From the moment the alarm screamed across the base that icy morning, Captain Elena Ward knew the sky was calling her in a way it never had before. The cold wind swept across the runway like warning whispers, rattling against the metal frames of sleeping aircraft that stood like silent giants. The world hadn't yet woken, but Elena could feel something rising inside her, something that demanded, quietly but powerfully, that today would be different. Today, the sky would test her. Today, she would either rise in history, or fall forgotten. She tightened her gloves, looked at the jet she'd flown 100 times, and felt a pulse in her chest unlike anything she'd ever known. Only later would she understand why. Elena had grown up near an airfield, the daughter of a mechanic who spent his life listening to engines like they were living things with hearts and souls. As a little girl, she would sit on a pile of old tires, watching fighter jets roar into the sky, painting streaks of silver across the clouds. She understood even then that some people walk toward destiny while others fly toward it, and she had never been meant to walk. But being a woman in the 1980s United States Air Force meant stepping into rooms filled with eyes that weighed her worth before she even moved. Every test she passed, every record she shattered, every mission she excelled in was met not with respect, but with suspicion. Was she lucky? Was she helped? Was she protected? No one asked those questions about her male peers, yet every accolade she earned came with shadows attached. Still, she endured, not with loud rebellion but with quiet excellence, the kind that speaks louder than any argument ever could. The trouble began after a training operation over the Nevada desert, where she executed a perfect emergency landing after a system malfunction. What should have earned her admiration instead sparked a storm of accusations. One of the senior commanders filed a report claiming she had taken unnecessary risks. Another implied she was becoming reckless. A third simply wrote that he didn't trust her to lead a squadron. Within days, the board made their decision: they wanted her grounded. They said it was for her safety. They said it was for the integrity of the program. Elena knew it was because she didn't fit the image of the pilot they wanted. She wasn't loud, brash, or made of the same ego-driven steel as the men who strutted through the halls. Her strength was quiet, and quiet power threatens the insecure. She remembered walking out of the boardroom, the desert heat hitting her face like a slap, feeling her dreams unraveling thread by fragile thread. For the first time, she wondered if they were right. Maybe she didn't belong here. Maybe she was pretending. Maybe the sky wasn't meant for her after all. But that night, when she returned to the empty airstrip where only the blinking runway lights kept her company, she looked at the dark silhouette of her jet and felt a pull deep in her chest. The sky had never doubted her. Only people did. Then everything changed the morning the distress call came in. An Allied pilot had lost navigation over the mountains, their aircraft caught in a freezing updraft that pushed them dangerously off course. The storm sweeping through the region was violent, unpredictable, and worsening by the minute. The nearest available rescue pilot was hours away. Without intervention, the aircraft would crash before help could reach them. Elena didn't think. She acted. She ran straight to her aircraft, heart pounding, knowing that once she launched without authorization, the consequences would be permanent. But lives were at stake, and she couldn't stand by and watch disaster unfold. Technicians shouted as she sprinted past, some trying to stop her, others too stunned to move. She climbed into the cockpit with the muscle memory of someone born for that seat. Engines roared awake beneath her, and before the command tower even realized what she was doing, she was rolling down the runway, cutting through the rising storm clouds that gathered like claws waiting to tear her apart. She flew into the storm not with fear, but with purpose, because purpose is stronger than fear when it lives in the heart of someone who knows they are meant to do what others doubt. The storm hit her like a wall. Wind shear battered the aircraft violently, lightning flashed dangerously close, and turbulent currents fought to push her off course. But Elena steadied her breathing, tightened her grip, and focused. She'd been trained for chaos, but this wasn't chaos, it was the sky testing her resolve. She pushed deeper into the storm until ice began forming on the frame, weighing the aircraft down. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. She had only seconds to make decisions that would determine not only her fate, but the fate of the pilot she was trying to save. When she finally located the distressed aircraft, it was spiraling downward in a deadly corkscrew motion. The pilot inside was nearly unconscious, the jet shaking violently as it struggled against the wind. Elena positioned herself above and behind the aircraft, calculating every movement with precision. But as she approached, a sudden downdraft slammed her jet downward, sending alarms screaming throughout her cockpit. She realized with horror that both jets were now caught in a vertical collapse of air, a deadly phenomenon almost impossible to escape. This was the moment that would decide everything. Her instructors had taught her hundreds of maneuvers, but none for this scenario. None for trying to stabilize two aircraft while fighting a collapsing pocket of atmosphere. None for the choice she had to make now. And yet, deep in her memory, she recalled something her father once said as they watched jets carve paths through the sky. Planes are machines, he told her, but flying is something more. Sometimes the sky gives you a rhythm no one else can hear. If you feel it, trust it. So she listened, not to the alarms, not to the fear, not to the doubt. She listened to the rhythm of the storm around her, the pressure of the air, the tilt of her aircraft. She felt the sky, not as an enemy, but as something alive. And then, she did the impossible. She performed a maneuver no one had ever taught, no one had ever even theorized, a reverse angular drift combined with a rolling lift hook, using the storm's own force against itself. It was madness to anyone watching from the outside, but to her, it was instinct. She hooked her jet slipstream beneath the falling aircraft, pushing it upward with a rising corridor of redirected airflow. Inch by inch, she stabilized its spin until the distressed pilot regained consciousness enough to level out. The storm didn't relent. It roared around her like an angry beast. But she kept fighting until both aircraft broke through the clouds into open sky, where sunlight poured across her cockpit like a promise. She escorted the damaged jet safely back to base, her hands trembling as the adrenaline faded. When she landed, the runway was lined with stunned personnel. Some looked shocked. Some looked ashamed. A few looked grateful. But none looked the way they used to look at her. Everything changed after that day. Reports were rewritten. Accusations dissolved. Commanders who once doubted her called her a miracle, a prodigy, a hero. But Elena didn't care about the praise. She cared only that the sky had proven her right, that she did belong, that her instincts mattered, that sometimes the greatest lessons are the ones no one can teach because they live only in people brave enough to trust themselves. Years later, when recruits asked her how she pulled off that impossible maneuver, she would smile softly and tell them the truth: some things are felt, not learned. Some battles are won not in the air, but inside the heart long before the engines ever ignite. And some destinies aren't given, they're claimed. She continued flying for decades, training new generations of pilots not to imitate her, but to believe in themselves the way she believed in the sky. And though many tried, no one ever recreated that impossible maneuver. Maybe they never needed to. Maybe some miracles are meant for one person alone. If this story touched your heart, if it made you feel something deep inside, then let your support be a part of her legacy. Leave a like and share it so more people can feel inspired by courage like hers. Before we end, tell me in the comments, what moment in your life taught you to trust yourself even when others doubted you? And with that, her story closes like the final echo of a departing jet, leaving behind a trail of courage in the sky, a reminder that sometimes the world tries to ground you, until you rise beyond everything they ever imagined.